Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you may very well be joining us. My name is Andrew and I'm joined by my wife and business partner, Masha. We're very excited to have you today. This is obviously the second step in this process. You've all completed your assessments and I'm sure you eagerly anticipate getting your report. But we wanted to really just take a moment first to give you a brief understanding and foundation of what the Enneagram is about. And then that will obviously lead into you getting your report, being able to understand your report fully, and that'll lead then into your individual debrief and potentially the workshops that you might have later after this. So my name is Andrew Grunewald. I'm an executive coach and director for NineLeaders Management Consulting. I've been in learning and development for the last 20 years. I've run businesses in the travel industry in particular. But very focused on high performance teams and taking individuals from where they are to the next level. That's me in a nutshell very quickly. Mash, do you want to introduce yourself very quickly?
So, like Angie said, his wife. That is actually the thing that stands on my business card. Angie's wife. In my spare time, I moonlight as an organizational consultant. I am accredited in Enneagram and have a honors in industrial and organizational psychology. But that's more of a bye-bye.
And you didn't mention heels.
I don't think it's relevant to this.
All right. So, like I said, we really want to lay the foundation today of what the Enneagram is about and how you can potentially read your report. We're going to jump straight in so we don't take up too much time and really just give you an insight as to what you can expect from the next little while from this program. So, from a contents perspective, we're first going to jump into what the Enneagram is about. Masha is going to take us through quite a bit of information there. Then we're going to look at how the Enneagram works. And this is also very closely related to your report. So everything we discussed today is going to be in your report. So you don't have to worry about missing anything. And then secondly, or thirdly, at least, we're going to look at what your report will actually contain, the structure of the report. And then obviously the next steps, what you can expect from your debrief and, like I said, potentially the workshops. So Mash, do you want to kick us off, take us through what exactly the Enneagram is all about and just give us some background?
So before we talk about the Enneagram, I'd like to discuss the concept of personality testing. There are tons on the internet. You can find them by searching. I'm sure you could have been recommended one by a colleague or told about one by a friend. I'm pretty certain that out of everybody watching, you must have all completed at least one. There are so many varieties. The personality assessments attempt to put a definition on personality and use the results to predict behavior, whether this is in your personal life or work-related performance behavior. What I personally found, especially from when I took my tests, is that they provide you with quite a bit of information about your basic qualities. Some of them are strengths, some of them are weaknesses. They talk about things that you could be interested in or what career path to take or would be suited to your personality. But then that's where the conversation ends. There's no forward direction thereafter. If I was to speak in a term of box of cards, the personality test might say, so you are a 5 of clubs. This is what you are. This is what you can do. Thanks. It's been a great chat. And you don't actually know where to go forth. Enter the Enneagram. This is a different type of assessment. It focuses on the entire human psyche on a holistic level. The concept of the Enneagram is basically to interpret human personality with the assumption that personality is dynamic. This means that it can change depending on your environment, depending on your goals and what you would like to achieve. Thereby, everybody has the capacity to grow, to learn, to change, to evolve. thus giving you the tools to step outside of that box, to step outside of that stereotype of being a 5 of clubs, for example. One of the very first things the Enneagram encourages is self-awareness. Without this knowledge, you might as well be operating on autopilot. You know where you are, you know where you're going, but everything else in between is a bit of a blur. By rejecting the knowledge of self, you become unaware of your own limitations and the barriers that you might find yourself facing along the way to your journey. Unlike other popular assessments that tend to ask the what aspect question pertaining to your behavior, Enneagram chooses to ask why, thus putting a big focus on your internal motivation and how that affects your everyday interactions. Understanding of your personal motivation only comes through the act of self-acknowledgement and self-awareness. This enlightens you to some of your personal weaknesses, limitations, possible boundaries, barriers that you didn't know you had, as well as the strengths that you already possess, the strengths that you might need to learn in order to overcome those. The Enneagram fosters the ability or the access to self-discovery. It opens the doors for self-development, for integration of yourself with the other healthy personality aspects of the other Enneatypes, and just nudges you that a little bit closer to being able to step outside of that box and achieve the real self that is you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mash. So to elaborate on just a little bit of what Mash has said, I want to take us a little bit deeper into exactly where does Enneagram fit into with regards to personality tests in terms of behavior, of what Mash has already mentioned. And if you could imagine for a second an iceberg. You've maybe have seen Titanic, you know that Titanic with the iceberg, you've got 20% of the iceberg sits above the water, and then 80% of the iceberg sits actually below the water. So this portion above the water is really related to our behavior, which our behavior would be made up of our actions. Those actions done regularly equals results. Equals habits. And then habits over a longer period of time will give us our results. Now, as a coach, I really focus on how do we improve individuals and people's performance and their results. The reality is that to understand this and to change your actions, habits, and results, you need to look a little bit below the water, at that 80% that sits below the water, which is made up of your personality and your motivations. Your personality is your intuition, your gut, your emotions, and your thinking. Now, where Enneagram comes in sits at a very deep, from a psychological perspective, at your very core level around your core drivers and your core fears, where a lot of other personality tests will look at your thinking, your emotions, your intuition, and gut. So when I'm working with individuals or teams, we really start looking at, to change their results, we start right at the bottom and going, right, what drives you in life? What is that core motivation? What is that core fear that's potentially been brought out over the years through either nature or nurture? And how's that entrenched in your life? Now, from that perspective, you've got, from a psychological perspective, you're looking at something has taken place in your life, usually very early on in your developmental years. So usually by the time you are in your mid-teens, something has happened to really entrench your motivation, your core driver, and your core fear. So it doesn't tend to change over the span of your life unless something incredibly dramatic happens. And when I say dramatic, something dramatic that changes your entire psychological makeup. And this is where Enneagram speaks to, is your core motivations. Now, what does that mean? All right. So now Mash has already spoken about the different types. We call in Enneagram the 9 types or archetypes of the personality. And each of these types have one of these core drivers and core fears. Ennea is the Greek translation for 9, and gram means to write, or a word or a description or a picture. And you'll notice in your report that you've effectively got 9 different types. Now, the first thing to realize is that every single one of us has all 9 types within us. We just have one that is more developed than the others, and which speaks to that core motivation or core fear. So if we had to go through and really look at each of the 9 types, you'll notice that each type has got a 2-word descriptor, and this really summarizes what that type is. Like I've said before, every single one of us will have all 9 types within us. We'll just have one that is potentially more developed than the others. So to take us through that, we're going to jump into what a brief description of each of the 9 types, what their qualities are, what that means to them, and how that then relates in terms of showing up in the world. So if you think about it, we're going to start with the strict perfectionist, the number 1. Their core motivation is really to do the right and good thing. They're usually very principled individuals, very objective, very conscientious, very structured, very quality minded. They can be quite judgmental and critical because they want to do the right thing, but they're usually very more self-critical of themselves, if that makes sense. They're very concerned around how they show up and doing, like I said, the right and good thing. From the considerate helper, Mash, do you want to take on the 2s?
Sure thing. So the word itself, considerate and helper, kind of forms an idea of what this person might be. Their main motivation is to be liked and appreciated. However, they do not believe that they have what it takes in order to be loved just for themselves. And so it becomes more of a give to get type of relationship where they will be considerate and be helpful to other individuals in order to get back appreciation, love, attraction of any sort. They generally can be seen from the outside as generous, helpful, caring, very much self-sacrificing. This is the type that will set themselves on fire just to keep other people warm. It goes to that extreme in a way. They are friendly and they are warm-hearted. But if it gets to an unhealthy side, an unhealthy projection of said type, people may interpret them as being intrusive into their personal space, especially if the help that they're offering is unneeded or unwarranted, manipulative, from the aspect where they are giving their help in order to receive affection in return. They could come across as very needy simply because they're constantly asking whether they can help with something, whether they can do anything for you. And in correlation with that, quite a bit insecure.
So the third one, the competitive achiever. Now, the competitive achiever's need in the world and desire is to outshine the rest. They see the world as a competition and they want to be the best. It's literally in the 2 words, competitive achiever. They are usually very ambitious individuals, very efficient, very adaptable, very driven, and very results orientated, which means, like I said, they see the world as a competition. In that regard, in an unhealthy state, a 3 could be perceived as taking shortcuts. It's not so much about what gets achieved. It's not so much about how things get achieved. It's more about the what and what things get achieved. So they usually like to show up in the world and represent how successful they are. The language that they talk, the actions that they take will be all geared towards what needs to get done and how can we do this as efficiently as possible, with the result that sometimes they can be perceived as stepping on others, taking shortcuts, like I said earlier, and not really worrying about how others are doing as long as the results are achieved. Usually very, very, like I said, from a results perspective, they're all about the competition and making sure that they show up in the world looking the best, being the best, and being seen as the best. The 4?
The intense creative. If you could ever imagine looking at the world through the lens of a film camera, this would be the way that a type 4 would be looking at the environment. They see the world through rich, colorful colors. When they look at a rainbow, they actually feel the intensity. When they sit in a meadow, you can imagine the butterflies wafting past them and the birds singing up in the trees, because that is the environment that they create. Very, very intensely emotional individuals, simply because they are searching for that authenticity in the world. They are searching for the unique experience. They're not interested in the mundane of the everyday life. On healthy side of emotions, they could be perceived as sensitive, creative, authentic, intensive, and that they have a very strong appreciation of the beauty that surrounds them. From an unhealthy personality aspect, that intensity of emotions could really overwhelm another person, because when a type 4 is happy, they're incredibly happy. When they're sad, they are incredibly sad, which also brings in the stigma of being a drama queen, where everything is dialed up to 10. They could be seen as self-absorbed simply because they are focused on their meaning in life and their uniqueness and their authenticity. And in unhealthy scenarios, they could also be seen as melancholic and very temperamental.
Right. So where the 4s go intensely and deeply into the emotions and their creativity, your 5s, your quiet specialist, goes very deep into thinking. So the core motivation for the 5 is really to understand what is happening, how things happen. They love to pull things apart. They love to understand processes. Whereas the 4s are very creative because of that depth of emotion. The 5s are very innovative because they like to think things through. The qualities of the 5 is they're very perceptive, very curious. They can sometimes be considered unsentimental because they can detach themselves from whatever is taking place in front of them. They're usually very self-sufficient individuals, and like I said, inventive as opposed to creative. The quiet element for them is they're not going to be the loudest necessarily in the room from a behavior perspective. They like to watch. Another word for them is the observers. They like to take a back seat, watch what is happening, understand all the dynamics that are taking place. And from a specialist perspective, they like to go deep into knowledge. They're usually lifelong learners. They will study topics and go to a very, very deep understanding of that particular topic. Like I said, they can sometimes be seen as standing aloof and a little bit judgmental because they've got such a wealth of knowledge that if they're listening to anybody is portraying themselves as an expert or a specialist, the 5 will go, are you saying exactly what you're saying? And is that exactly what it's meant to be? I know a little bit better sometimes. So they can come across sometimes as the know-it-all, but they really bring a depth of understanding and questioning to how and why things work.
The loyal skeptic. This individual or this type, the motivation is to be safe and to belong. That is quite a conflicting need. On the one hand, they need to be part of a group in which they feel safe. They yearn to belong to a team in which they are safe. But at the same time, they are skeptical of everyone that surrounds them, which makes it quite difficult of a balance to figure out whether you can trust somebody enough to include them in your inner circle, or whether they've got ulterior motives. With that said, once you've passed the test of trust with a type 6, you've got an incredibly loyal friend that is there to look after you and to protect you to all ends. In terms of the worldview, type 6s see the world as a very dangerous place, and they believe that they're the ones that need to protect themselves as well as those that are close to them, and to keep them away from danger. From healthy behaviors, the type 6 can be seen as very prepared, especially for worst case scenarios. They are very responsible. They don't go taking unnecessary risks just for the fun of it. They are incredibly cautious and skeptical, but at the same time, once you've come through that trust circle that I mentioned, they are trustworthy themselves. They're incredibly dependable. They're loyal. They become responsible not only, or they feel responsible not only for themselves, but also for you. From an unhealthy perspective, they are constantly suspicious. They are alert for the majority of the time. This may result in a perception of anxiousness that comes from them, which then passes on to the people around them, where they interpret anxiousness as well. One of the other characteristics of the type 6 is that their behavior might change from being fully phobia focused, as in they are scared of everything, to counterphobia, where they rush in at danger because they think that that's the best way to cope with it. But to the people around them, it is confusing. And so they don't quite know how to interpret that person.
All right. On the opposite end of the scale from the 6, where they see risk and danger behind every single bush, we've got the enthusiastic visionary. Now, the enthusiastic visionary, their motivation in life is really to experience it all and also to avoid pain. Now, that whether the 6 will see a problem with every solution potentially, the 7s will see a solution and an opportunity in every single problem. They are very optimistic individuals, very flexible, very future orientated. They can be quite practical and obviously incredibly adventurous. They want to see and experience everything that life has to offer, with the result that on an unhealthy space, they can often be seen as jumping from one thing to another. They're never committed, they're never disciplined. Their mind will travel at 1,000 miles an hour, and they can be seen as not completing things. In a healthy state, they can look at opportunities and identify and make links between various ideas, and look at going, well, what is the opportunity in here? How can we possibly go and achieve this? So like I said, very future orientated, very good at dreaming, bringing up new concepts, and not necessarily getting stuck in the detail, which can also frustrate other types because they're not very detail orientated. So they just want to see bigger picture. What is the fun that we can have, and how can we be as creative and expressive as we possibly can be? Visionary, we've mentioned that they are future orientated, and enthusiastic, they just bring the party. They want to have fun in every single thing that they do, but they can sometimes be seen as not committed necessarily.
Cool. And then we have the active controller. The motivation behind this type is to have control and to display strength. Their worldview is that, again, the world is a very tough place. And they've observed through one stage or another that the weak get taken advantage of. And so in order to escape that vulnerability, they will do everything that they can in order to appear strong, in order to appear tough, so that they can protect themselves and their loved ones, their family, their close circle of friends. This is another type that's a bit of a contradiction all on its own, because people might see them as controlling, possibly abusive, demanding, very intense. But there isn't any other type that you would want on your side in case of danger or an emergency. They're almost seen as a safe harbor in a storm. They will always find a plan, they will always make things happen, and they will keep you safe. From a healthy behavior perspective, we've mentioned that they come across very strong, which can be seen as a strength. They're very decisive. They have a plan. They do not back down in terms of or in time of uncertainty. They're very frank, which could be a positive and it could be a negative, depending on how you interpret that. From a negative perspective, they could be seen as confrontational. They could be seen as insensitive to the needs or to the feelings of others. They also could come across as very controlling and demanding a lot from others. And the main concept behind that is that they're very demanding of themselves in order to maintain that power. And so they demand the same level from everybody else. They also focus very much on spreading their own influence, or the circle of their influence, so that they can make the circle bigger. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Now, squeezed between the 8, the active controller, and the 1, that is the strict perfectionist, we have our 9s, which are the adaptive peacemakers. And their real desire in life is to keep the balance and create harmony. And hence they are between the 8 and the 1, really creating harmony between this the strong controller and the strict perfectionist. Their qualities, the description of the 9 is they really are trying to be as agreeable as possible with as many people as possible. They're very understanding. They take the time to understand every person's point of view, and they're very patient in doing that. They want to get an understanding of how everybody's doing, what people are feeling in the situation, and to be able to bring that balance and harmony to whatever crisis or situation they might be facing. They're very supportive of others, and they want to be seen as very genuine in and of themselves. They strive to bring balance. So when there's a crisis, they want to be calm and really think things through to make sure that the actions that are taken are in line with, in a harmonious way, if you want to put it that way. Unfortunately, in that regard, they can sometimes be seen as taking a back seat and going, let's just let things lie. Let's not make a decision right now. Let's see how things go. Let's see how things play out, and let's take action tomorrow if we can. So again, in that regard, they want to be create balance and harmony, but they're not always seen as taking the quickest action and the quickest way to a particular result. All right, so now that we've given you a brief description of each of the 9 types, we want to jump a little bit deeper into understanding how each of these 9 types can potentially be flavored by different elements. Not every single strict perfectionist, for example, is going to look exactly like every other strict perfectionist. So it's important to understand what are the nuances that could possibly arise. And the first element is really around, Masha, do you want to take this away?
Sure thing. So they're called the wings of the type, and it is the type that is directly to the left and directly to the right of your Ennea type. These do not change. So if you're a type 9, your wings will be 8 and 1. You can't have a wing of 4 and 2, for example. Those wings are considered to be the flavorings to the delicious meal that is you. You will lean generally more into the qualities of the 1 type, more than the other. Although sometimes it is found that a person would have an equal usage of both qualities to their hand. So as a type 2, for example, they could lean more towards the type 1 philosophy or motivation, thus influencing the way that they appear in the world. Alternatively, they could be going towards the 3, which is the other wing, which again changes their motivation, their behavior, or at least the way that they appear to the rest of us.
All right. The second element that is going to influence a particular type, now that we've got the wings under control, is what we call your centers of expression. And this is made up of your thinking, your intuition, your gut, your actions, and your feelings. And remember when you looked at the iceberg model theory, this is really around your personality. So how does your personality potentially is shown up through your motivations? Every single person, every single one of us has the ability to think, to take action, and to have emotions and feeling. But each individual will have a different preference for one of those 3. So you might spend a little bit more time in your thinking space. You might spend a little bit more time in your emotions. You might spend a little bit more time taking action. You'll still go through all 3. You'll still think, you'll still feel, and you'll still take action, but you might just spend a little bit more time, and your preference might be in one of the 3. So what that means is, for example, you could have a quiet specialist 5 who naturally is very much around understanding and sits very much in their thinking space, and they spend a lot of time in that thinking space. They could potentially look and show up in the world very differently to a 5, a quiet specialist, who sits a lot in their action center. So the 5, yes, they still think a lot, but the preference for that particular individual might be in taking action. So again, that's going to differentiate you from potentially someone else that's the same type as you, but you might have a preference for either feeling, whereas they might have a preference for thinking.
Now we move on to our core instincts. Each type has got a little bit of one of 3, a little bit of each 3 instincts, but they gravitate more towards one specific one. The gravitation to which one isn't necessarily chosen by us, as it is quite subconscious and depends on the stage of your life that you are in right now. The 3 instincts are self-preservation, which means that you pretty much, it's you, yourself, and you. One-on-one, which talks about close relationships and very close connections, as in your family, your loved ones, and your bestest of friends. And the final one is your social instinct, which talks about group mentality or your community. If I had to explain these 3 in terms of an example, imagine that you are on a flight to a holiday. All of a sudden, when you land, you're told that your luggage is missing. Your very first instinct would either be to think, well, that's great, but now what am I going to wear? Where am I going to get my toiletries from? Your other instinct could be to phone your friends, close friends in your family, to tell them about this ordeal. And the third instinct might be to say, that's pretty horrible. I hope everybody else had managed to find their luggage or didn't lose it in the first place. Thus focusing or placing your focus either on yourself, your close friends and family, or on the group in general.
All right. So we've covered 3 things that are really going to flavor your type. Like we said, these 3 elements of your wings, your centers of expression, and your instincts are really going to make a difference in terms of how you potentially show up in the world. And that really encompasses really the basics of what Enneagram is. I know we've covered a lot already this afternoon. There's one more element that we really want to just touch on. And this is now what Masha spoke about right in the beginning, is Enneagram's purpose is not to box you into a particular type and tell you everything about who you are, what you're doing, and that is all that you're ever going to be. The purpose of the Enneagram is really to go firstly create awareness of who and what you are, and then give you a guideline or give you a map to be able to get out of that box or that label. And this is where you'll notice these lines that come into play here. Now, they're not for decoration. There is a purpose behind them. And you'll notice every single type has got 2 lines leading away. So if you're a 1, you've got a line leading to the 4, you've got a line leading to the 7. If you are a 5, you've got a line leading to the 8, as well as a line leading to the 7. And this is really the developmental phase of the Enneagram. You'll notice, having gone through the descriptions, some of the elements, the unhealthy behaviors that certain types might have, these lines will now speak into the strengths of other types. And this is the ability then to go, right, this is where I am, this is how I show up, this is my potential strengths, and these are my potential blind spots and weaknesses. How can I overcome those blind spots and weaknesses? And by following these lines, it gives you an indication of what you can adopt and stretch into another type to adopt their behaviors potentially. And a very simple example I always use is for a 7, enthusiastic visionary. I mentioned earlier that 7s can, they like to be out there, they do get a lot of new ideas, but one of the challenges that 7s have is that they don't go very deep into understanding. They'll learn something new and automatically they'll be considered as the expert. Or they think they're the expert, but they don't get very deep into that knowledge because they've got an attention span that jumps from the next one idea to the next idea. So a developmental pathway for a 7 could potentially be to lean on the 5, make use of that line to the 5, where 5's motivation is really to get deep understanding. So if a 7 from a developmental perspective can get a deep understanding of a particular topic, they can live a more actualized or fulfilled life. Similarly, I said the 7 bounces from one thing to another. They struggle to commit, they struggle to finish things. And one of the strengths there of the 1, which is a line leading to the 1, is really around that discipline, around the structure, the conscientiousness, and the quality. So for developmental purposes, the 7 can potentially step into that 1 and adopt elements of that 1. And similarly for every single one of the types, the lines leading from your particular number, we call your lines of stretch and release, and really gives you opportunity to step out of your type and your box and adopt other elements and other strengths of other types. So that brings us to pretty much the end of and the understanding of what the Enneagram is about. We're going to jump into explaining what your report is about and what your report looks like. Right. So, like I said, this is a sample report. It's not my actual report. It's just named Andrew Sample. And there's a couple things to be aware of here. Firstly, there's 2 versions of the report. One report is 23 pages long, and the other type is a 42-page report. So very, very in-depth, very detailed. The first 23 pages of both reports are exactly the same information. So you're getting pretty much exactly what each of the reports do stipulate. Another important element here is around the fact that it is strictly confidential, which means that nobody besides yourself, Masha, and myself will have access to your report. So that's incredibly important. If we are working in terms of a business or a group, we might share your particular type, but we won't share any of the detail that goes into your specific report. So your report itself, if we scroll down just so that you can see what it looks like, it gives a brief description of the 9 types, pretty much what we've covered already in this video, a little bit more information. It then goes into explaining more detail around what the Enneagram actually is. And then it goes into how to actually use the report and how to read the report. So keys to unlocking the potential of this report. It talks around what your opportunities are and how you can potentially use the report to better an area of your life. And then the actual content of the report, very much similar to what we've covered already. It will describe your core Enneagram type, the 27 subtypes, which is linked to your instincts, so your self-preservation, your one-on-one, and your social instinct. Obviously, 3 times 9 is 27, so those are your subtypes. Your centers of expression, my maths is fantastic. Centers of expression, so your thinking, feeling, and gut or action. And then your wing influence. The report will take you through a little bit around your self-awareness and integration, as well as potential strain levels in different areas of life. On this note, I just want to make one point here with regards to strain levels. With regards to the assessment, That is the one portion of the report that is very dynamic, in the sense that if you had to do the assessment again in 3 months' time, your strain levels might very well change. Your core type and your motivational levels will not necessarily change, because that is consistent and throughout your entire life, whereas your strain levels will potentially change. Your self-awareness and integration speaks around how closely do you align with that particular type. So a low integration will really talk about the fact that it's very entrenched, that type, both the strengths and the weaknesses are very, very entrenched, whereas a high integration will talk to your flexibility to be able to move out of your type and engage with the strengths of other types particularly. Um, and then the last section will really cover what your lines of tension and release are. So those are the 2 lines that lead from your particular number to another number, and it'll give you tips on how you can step into that map. And then just 2 things to be aware of. You'll notice icons throughout your report. You've got this little gray box here, which is your development exercise box. And this really is there to encourage you to question how you can possibly develop. So it'll give you some tips and direction as to what you can do around development. And then there'll be certain areas which have got a blue highlight box around, and that is specifically meant to you as the individual. Some of the descriptions in the core Enneagram type will be general to that particular type, but when there's anything that's got a blue box around it, really speaks to you as an individual as to how you answered in the assessment itself. From there, from page 6 onwards, it now actually jumps into, finally, what your type is. Da-dun, 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 drum roll, please. You will get a description of what you resonated with most. It'll give the general summary of that particular type. And now to start going into a lot of detail around your thinking patterns, your action patterns, your feeling patterns. It'll talk about your blind spots, your focus of attention, your worldview, your self-talk, your gifts, the vices potentially. It will then go into the strengths and the positive qualities of your type, as well as then also weaknesses and challenges. And then as per the contents, it'll take you through a lot more details, your subtypes, what you might show up as, how that will influence your type, and what the potential challenges that you might face. So what does that mean now for our next step? So if we had to look at our next step is really around an individual debrief. So the requirements for that debrief is that you go through your report uh, page by page as much as possible, and to really highlight things that you resonate with. The objective of the Enneagram is not to tell you who you are. It's really a journey of self-discovery to go, do I resonate with this report? What are the things that I resonate with? What are the things I don't resonate with? And then investigate why I don't resonate with that, because it could be an unconscious element that you're not quite aware of yet, or alternatively, it could potentially be something that you don't want to actually explore. You don't want to go there. It's a deep down gut. And that's creates an opportunity to really think that through that type. The role of the debrief is to answer any questions that you might have, to really look at how we can apply this learning and this awareness to your current position, and how can or role, and how can we look at then what is the actions, the habits, and the behaviors or the results that you've got, and how that is affected by these particular motivations that you would have in your particular type. So ideally, if you can, read through the report as much as possible. If you do have the 42-page report, all that will then include is elements of leadership, management, conflict management, look at decision making. So again, there's opportunity there from a leadership perspective to really understand a little bit more detail as to how you show up as a leader in your type specifically. But again, those extra pages are not necessarily from a self-awareness and self-development perspective as necessary. So that's it from our side. Masha, any last thoughts that you might have?
Just to confirm on what you said just now, that the report itself isn't there to be taken at face value. If you are disagreeing with something, please disagree. I think
100%.
it's one of my favorite parts of a debrief is to hear what it is that you don't resonate with and what are the reasons there for. It actually starts the most meaningful conversations, and it either causes for light bulb moments where you make a connection where you didn't see one before, or it then opens up opportunities for us to have a look at whether there has been any mistyping before we continue on a journey of development based on the wrong information. So don't feel shy, speak to us, and we'll be able to guide you through along with it. And a final note, this is a very exciting journey, but it's a journey that you need to take, and we are there to help you and guide you along. And I can't wait to start that journey with you.
Absolutely. So that's it from our side. We've covered a lot today. If you want to rewatch the video, you're more than welcome. Like I said, everything that we've covered today is in your actual report. We'll be sending you your report shortly, and then we'll be setting up for your debrief. We can't wait to catch up with you on an individual basis, and really, like Masha said, to support you on this journey. So thank you very much for your time. It's been great to spend it with you, and we're looking forward to your individual debrief. All right. Take care, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.